back, guys. My name's Alex. That's Eileen. And you guys are watching Straight to Chicane podcast. And, guys, honestly, we've been gone for a little while. We've been busy with real-life stuff. And we've really only had enough time to catch the races and kind of move on, right?
Well, we went to the race, too.
We did go to the race. We were in Austin. And, honestly, we have a little bit to talk about with that this week in podcast. Because, I still think it's kind of relevant for people that are, wanting to go to a race. I think we should give our insights on that too. But really, it's mostly about the Mexican GP. Today we saw Max Verstappen take a huge win.
Another huge win.
Dominant win.
Another record broken.
And honestly, there was no DQs from Lewis as of right now that we know of.
There's no disqualifications yet.
So
we are filming this, I guess, a little bit prematurely.
We are.
But we'll see.
But anyways, guys, if you haven't yet, please like, subscribe. Thank you for everything that you guys do. We enjoy talking to you guys about Formula One, and honestly, it's been kind of fun gaining new knowledge and stuff like that. But anyways, let's talk about Austin. We went to Austin. We stayed in the campground right outside of the track. Honestly, I think it's the only way to go. What was your insights? Anything positive, negative to say right away?
I mean, I always enjoy it. I think it was a great race. I think this is our first weekend in Austin with a sprint race, so it was a much different format of a weekend. Some positives and negatives, I think the disqualifications being the top, but overall experience for us, camping is great. I think we talked to a lot of people about it. It's definitely the way to go. Easy trackside access. It was hot this year, like record-breaking hot for Austin. Not a lot of wind, so it was nice to be able to go back and get some water. But overall, yeah, enjoyable. Much more enjoyable for us than last year because we had a different travel accommodations than we did if you were following us last year when we went.
Yeah, so we went to one of the concerts one night, and we saw Queen, and I kind of was talking to a European family, and they were talking about lines and stuff like that, though, people were complaining that there were lines here. Honestly, I don't think the lines were that bad at all compared to other races. I think that at least where we were and able to get through, we didn't really wait much for anything.
No, I think for us this year, comparing obviously to Canada, we went to Montreal earlier in the year. And when I think about like bathroom lines, bathroom accessibility, lines for food, lines for pretty much everything, I feel like it was way more accessible. Mm-hmm. And I mean, obviously, in comparison to last year in Austin, it was about the same.
I would say there was probably less people though this
year. Slightly less, yeah. Okay. I mean, Friday and Saturday definitely. Like I think on Friday you kept saying like, "Oh my God, there's so many open seats. There's so many open seats." But I'm like, well, people could be working. You never know. So, much different. But I think the majority of people that we saw that were there for the 3-day event were general admission ticket holders. And so, for us, we were in Turn 6 grandstands this year. We were in Turn 1 last year. So, for that, I feel like about the same when it comes to vacancies for seats. And it could just be people moving around the track. But for general admission, you have to literally come and camp your seat the entire day. Like as soon as the gates open, you are just baking in the sun. You need an umbrella, you need a fan, you need some water, you need all of that stuff to really hold those great positions for general admission.
And honestly, I feel like you were able to bring in quite a bit of things.
Oh my God, we saw people with like carts and
multiple carts, coolers.
Yeah, all sorts of stuff.
Lots of chairs, lots of umbrellas. Lots of long telephoto lenses, everything you could ever imagine, for sure.
Yeah. It was a good experience. I mean, I think for us, we stayed in a different seat this year, and we decided we would rather pay the money to be at Turn 1. I mean, couple pros and cons. We were at Turn 6, which is cool, and it's fast. The cars go by so fast. Like, I feel like, not that I need content or like to record cars going by, but they're going by so much faster than they are at Turn 1. Mm-hmm. Whereas like Turn 1, of course, you get the start, you get the, first corner access, you get all of that stuff. And they're going by at a much slower speed because it's such a sharp turn, which I thought we would get with the S's, but we didn't. even though the track was that much closer because we were literally in the first row.
We were in the first row. Honestly, I think we had a good vantage point. We were able to see multiple turns. We were able to see from pretty much turn 3 all the way to leaving turn 6, the top of breaking into turn 7. So it was a good vantage point for that little section of area. But yeah, not compared to a turn 1 viewpoint that Austin offers. I mean,
you get to see so much at turn 1.
From where we were sitting at turn 1, you were able to see the grandstand. So that means you were able to see that whole entire area from the grandstands, which you were. And honestly, I'd like to see a couple other spots too at some point. But I feel like still turn 1 there is the money shot, and that's why the field and the hill that's right there was packed. By the time we walked in,
it was like packed every day.
Sunday morning when we walked in, I would say the doors opened at 8. We were there at like 9:30, packed completely shoulder to shoulder, and I would say even outside of turn 6. That area was probably packed as well by that time.
Turn 3, I mean, I'm sure the entire area. So, but overall, it was a good experience. I mean, great weather. Like, it's crazy. We had amazing sunshine, barely any clouds, like every single day. Wake up on Monday morning and it's like a torrential downpour. Mm-hmm. Sunday was a little humid in the morning, but got to bake in heat, sauna. But yeah, overall, I mean, there's nothing like being at a race. There's nothing like the atmosphere. I mean, just getting to enjoy people. The other thing I will say is turn 1 provides a much easier access to the track.
Oh, for the walk after the race, yes.
And so we were able to get to the podium ceremony last year. We missed the podium ceremony this year. You know, we got there shortly after, and then they were like booting everybody. Glad we didn't wait because we were outside of the Mercedes garage, and obviously, they were under investigation after, so I'm glad we made the decision to leave when we did.
Yeah, they weren't coming out.
Yeah.
About that.
Yeah.
Look, we've been to now, I believe this is our 4th race. We've seen Miami, we've seen Montreal, and we've been to Austin twice now. I would still recommend Austin out of those 3. Miami was probably my least favorite, and probably compared to what Vegas is going to offer here coming up is going to be just as bad, where you're only going to be able to see just a small little portion. Mm-hmm. You know, it's cool that it's a street race, and I think it's going to be better to be watching it. So if you have a really good setup to watch it, enjoy it from there. Other than that, I mean, you can, if you want to go to the race, it seems like you can save some money right now. Vegas right now is pretty cheap.
Vegas is like on sale. It's discounted, which obviously we're seeing for Austin next year too. The tickets getting a lot cheaper.
Good.
And there was a lot of harsh criticism out there for obviously the attendance amount was down this year.
It was
really slightly, like 10,000 people over the 3-day period, but it was down. And I feel like you could tell looking at it, but really we didn't see a huge spike in ticket prices when it comes to the grandstands. It's the majority is the GA people. GA tickets did double almost.
And the RV camping spot went up $100.
Yeah.
So there was a little bit more going up. Maybe they'll bring that price back down for next year because maybe they didn't sell it. I mean, honestly, we had an open lot right next to us, but that just kind of opened up, throughout the weekend.
Well, people say, I think we learned that this year, buying your tickets like the day of. Somebody bought a ticket the day of on Friday, which is practice and qualifying because it was a sprint weekend, but they got a ticket in the grandstands for $80.
Yeah, wow.
So crazy. But, overall, I think talking about the racing of the weekend, it was a good weekend. I mean, obviously, we saw a little bit of a mix-up, qualifying, obviously, the sprint race. We saw the same people win, of course, Max winning.
I think, I think what Austin's with the sprint race showed us, or at least showed me, is that they do need to change it up with the sprint race because the sprint races that have been good this year were always variables that were outside of driver and car performance. It was like weather related or tires were an issue. It wasn't necessarily a dry session and drivers were just battling each other quite like it was here, because when it has been like that, it's kind of been boring. And this was more of one of the boring races or the boring sprints.
Yeah, I mean, it got a lot. It got a lot of hate.
It did.
For sure this weekend. I think Qatar was a great sprint race. I think it was the best of the year. We didn't talk about Qatar, obviously, because apparently we took a month hiatus from podcasting. Sorry. But the Qatar sprint race, I really enjoyed. I thought it was great. I thought there was good racing. We did get the yellow flag, so we were under safety car with the 3 going into that turn, the Ocon, Hulkenberg, Perez crash, which is where we saw Oscar Piastri win his first sprint race, So I think there's some variables to sprint races. I think we all assumed Qatar was going to be boring just based on the track, but we got some good racing. Like we had we had Lewis, on the charge at the end, good pace. That's where I feel like Mercedes started to show some promise.
Yeah.
But overall, there was some good overtaking. But a lot of people will say that it's because of the safety car. That's what made it interesting. That's what made it, whatever. But, I agree. There's got to be something.
Something's got to change. Whether I have heard some drivers say, like Carlos say, that reverse grid.
Well, you've been saying this since the beginning.
I have. But reverse that grid for sure. I think that's the right way to go.
I think that would make it interesting. I mean, a couple of the other things were like having a...
look what happened this weekend with Lando.
I know.
P18 to
well, I mean, every other like series does it. F2, the F1 Academy does it. So it would make sense for them to do that for sprint weekends. The other variable would be, should there be a separate championship, which you have also brought up before, like a just completely separate championship. And then the other one that I saw this week was like having $1 million prize.
Which I kind of like that too, because they do that for IndyCar. Like the Indy 500 has a purse of like $7 million or $5 million or whatever it has been.
I know, but then it's like, then there has to be separate regulations for sprint weekends. Like they go immediately into like Parc Fermé.
Sure.
They have to be able, because they're not going to, the risk and reward is going to be different. Kind of like there is with sprint races. Like, are they going to really push it on a sprint race when they're going to get 2 points if they finish, P7?
Right.
So it's tough. I feel like reverse grid is like definitely, it would make it more interesting, Like if Max was P20, qualified P1. Like
he's got to work his way up. But he's one of the biggest haters.
He hates the sprint race.
He does hate the sprint race. He would rather just not have them. And I understand that. Like the weekend is the Grand Prix.
Yeah.
And they're just being asked to spice it up because other leagues and other formulas do more racing. Like you see MotoGP has usually 2 races at the Grand Prix. Mm-hmm. There's other events that are always involved that are more so than what Formula was, because Formula One is just kind of, it wasn't mundane, but it was very formulatic. Like it was practice, qualifying, race. There was nothing else. And so
they just listen.
I don't know.
They want more action. I get it.
They want more action.
They shortened the practice sessions too, and they cut them in half. So it used to be an hour and a half per session. Now it's only an hour. So I feel like they're trying to just spice it up.
Yeah, and look, when there are sprint weekends, the only one practice, so 1 hour of practice only, which is kind of nice too, because then that only gives them the teams to really just dial it in quickly, or you either get it or you don't. Mm-hmm. And so that's kind of nice too, and that adds a little variable. It
does. But if you're dialed in with your car, you're going to get it right almost every weekend, except for Brazil 2022 when Red Bull did not get it right, and then we saw Mercedes have a shot.
Is there a sprint weekend in Brazil this week?
There is.
There is, isn't there?
The last one of the year.
The last one of the year in Brazil. I think that would be a good one.
Yeah, we love Brazil. Brazil always puts on a good weekend.
Anyways, I think we kind of talked enough about the funness of
I did not talk about the U.S. Grand Prix enough. I want to talk about the disqualifications.
Okay, we will.
We were there, and we were riding a high, like, oh my God, what a race. Lewis, great racing. We saw, this is the 3rd year in a row that we saw some great racing with Max and Lewis in Austin. So it's like, this year, it was great. Could Lewis have caught Max? I very well think he could have.
Another 2 laps or so, probably.
Another couple laps. So it just overall
better pit stops.
Way better pit stops. Like
Probably could have,
Mercedes,
wouldn't have had such a big deficit.
We've been saying it all year. I mean, they're not looking the greatest. I feel like they're like the 5th or 6th slowest pit stops on the grid, which is
although
pretty
I will
tough.
say this weekend in Mexico, they had a much better pit stops for Lewis.
No, and George too. They looked better. I mean, we only saw 2 pit stops. So, but still, I mean, I think it was great racing. Last year we saw, Lewis leading the Grand Prix, Max chase him down. Previous year we saw Lewis chasing Max, we said the same thing. A couple more laps, it would have been different. So it was an awesome, end. They do the podium ceremony, everything's great. We get back and we're like, wait, they're under investigation. And it's like all hell erupts. And of course the fans, everyone has something to say. And it's like, nobody can beat Max, even these illegal cars, these cheating cars. And it's like 1/2 of a millimeter for Charles Leclerc to get disqualified. And I get it. It's technicality, black and white, whatever. Mm-hmm. But 1/2 millimeter.
Yeah, I think.
Did that really change the performance?
Maybe a little bit better performance because they do have a minimum ride height. And both those cars were under that because that's what was shown. Okay, so
here's the question. So obviously, I'm sure most people know at this point, 2 cars disqualified. Those 2 were checked. They were chosen to be checked. Their cars have been chosen 5 times, Ferrari, Mercedes, this year. 5 times. The rest of the teams, the next closest team is 2 times. Okay, so over 50% more, which, whatever, it is what it is. I think they have more bouncing, whatever. But when you think about it, for the Drivers' Championship, if the Mercedes and the Ferrari are both disqualified, why don't we check the teammate's car? Because they both benefited. So Carlos benefited, moved ahead. George moved up, not obviously ahead of Lewis, but, I think that's the big thing. That and 50% of the cars disqualified. All the drivers have said that more cars were illegal.
Oh, probably for sure. Without a doubt, there were going to be more cars that would have been failed out. However, they don't have to test any more cars. They're not obligated to test any more cars. No one petitioned to have them test any more cars. That's because
that was because
half an hour rule.
Exactly. By the time it came out, they couldn't even protest it anyways.
I understand.
So, I mean, it's neither here nor there. We're in the middle of a triple header. Austin was the first race. Obviously, we move on to Mexico. We're going to Brazil next week. So the turnaround to, deconstruct, pack, ship, get everything out, I get it. It's just crazy.
Right.
But I would say the funniest part of the weekend was the joint post from Lewis and Charles. Yeah. So the collaboration post.
Yeah, I mean, that kind of went around everywhere. Everyone had probably seen it. It's a viral thing that had happened.
It was funny.
Most people talked about it. Who made the post? Who called who?
Yeah.
Who
decided to do the post?
Yeah.
What did the conversation happen like? So.
Yeah, kind of funny. That was a good moment, and definitely probably needed to relieve some of the tension because there has been some buildup, here with some of the Red Bull antics against Checo and things like that. There's a lot of animosity. In fact, we just saw online today, as we're recording this, fans fighting other fans.
Oh my God. I guess that's the other thing to talk about, obviously from Austin, and then we can move on. But, being there, it's, I would say his second home race. It's tough because Miami, when we went, is a pretty close to being a home race for Checo too. But
I would say he had a lot of fans there. A lot of people from Mexico were.
And I get it, cheering for him, and that's great. We love Checo too, but it is so disrespectful. Not only did they on the podium ceremony during Max boo him, but also during his national anthem screaming Checo.
Sure.
That's just uncalled for.
Yeah.
Now, I get it. People are mad about domination, but you cannot discredit Max for his performance and their teammates. And I think they show their, appreciation to each other. And I don't know. It was too much. And then this week, coming 1 week forward, great weekend, great build up, tough first lap. Checo went for the Lewis Qatar lap 1, turn 1. And
on the outside.
On the outside, no room, turned in too quick and taken out. And we're going to boo Charles and, all this other stuff. And we see people fist fighting in the audience. Like, this is not like true Formula One fans.
I would say it's drunk and disorderly people. I would say it's aggressive people. Not typical of Formula One fans.
I mean, even in the height of 2021, people were out of control, but I would never in a million years think to like go out and start an argument or a fight with someone over drivers. Like, you respect the sport, good racing, good shit luck. In Qatar, Lewis is like one of my favorite drivers. I was pissed off, but I also acknowledged that it was his fault.
Yes.
And he acknowledged it. And also Checo acknowledged it during the race. Like, okay, I would be mad at myself if I didn't go for it, but I went for it. Tough mistake. Opening lap.
He's going to go for it again tomorrow if he could.
Yeah, exactly. So.
Yeah. All right. So that's kind of leads us all the way up into, we kind of talked about Mexico now. And I thought qualifying was good. It was surprising.
Qualifying was crazy. It was like weird.
It was a weird fight because Ferrari was just kind of slow and sluggish, and then something happened.
They don't even know what happened.
Tires were.
They were like, call an ambulance, but not for me.
Yeah, I don't know what came on. I wish if you guys could tell us what you guys know about how Q1, Q2, they're just kind of just sneaking in, getting in there. So, and then
I mean, even in free practice 3, they were like, one of them was in the bottom 15 and the other one was in like P13. But Q1 was interesting, I will say. We had Albon looking sharp, Sargent coming out of free practice 3.
But Sargent didn't even get
a lap on because his time got deleted.
So he needed to go ask for permission to even be in the race because he didn't put a time down. Lando doesn't even make it out of Q1 after being on the podium for 3 consecutive races. His first lap got deleted.
He made a mistake in his first lap.
Okay.
And then came out and just didn't have it. So he qualified, which I guess was the star of the weekend, qualifying P17. And then...
P17 to what, P4? P5?
P6.
P6.
Yeah. So...
Not bad.
Not bad. No. P5.
Yeah,
P5.
I thought it was P5.
Yeah. So Q1 was interesting. And then on top of that, we had every single driver basically being under investigation. So we had Max and George holding up the pit lane, which is like the new thing to do this year.
That's because of the new rules. So now you have to stay under the certain time limits for your slow laps. Mm-hmm. And you can cheat that by being in the pit lane. And It doesn't count on your time until you cross that line. So that's their gray area of the rules. However, you're seeing now people impeding each other pretty dramatically.
We saw it in Singapore. GP, Max's engineer, played it off like, I'm so sorry. Did you have a problem? Everything's clear now. Like he wasn't holding up the pit lane, but
he was.
Politics. So then we had Lewis, who under the yellow flag from Alonso's spin. Did he not slow? All came out that he did slow. We had Logan, who ended up getting a 10-place grid penalty and 2 more penalty points on his license for overtaking a car under the yellow flags.
Do you know how many he has now?
He has 6.
Wow.
Yeah. 6 and $4 million in damage for Williams.
Ouch.
His seat is still up for grabs. Although we did see him on a technicality. Get a point in Austin. So he's officially on the board. What else did we see? We knew Yuki was going to be starting, last. He was taking an engine penalty, which we've been kind of talking about that, I feel like, all year is...
When will we start seeing the penalties come rolling
in? Yeah, like no one's taking engine penalties this year, it seems like.
It just seems like, some of the teams are struggling. Look what's happening with Aston Martin. They aren't even finishing races. Again, a double TNF, So we're seeing some weird things that are happening, and then now we're starting to see a couple of people starting to take engine penalties.
Yeah.
Because they need the new engine, honestly. And I don't know what Daniel did in that AlphaTauri, but he turned it on.
That's what I was trying to get to.
I mean, he turned it on. They put a fresh engine in for him.
Well, I don't know if they did. So it's race 2 back for him. We knew Yuki was taking the penalty, so we saw the tow in Q1 and Q2. And then Q3, Ricciardo puts it in P4 on his own merit.
Yeah, it did good. Yeah, without a tow. Yeah.
Without a tow. Impressive. What AlphaTauri, I think, is the win of the weekend. Like, they had the most improvement. I mean, they're obviously been at the bottom, so now they've moved up, I think, to P8 in the constructors from P10.
Yep. I mean, Yuki would have had a much better race if he didn't have the incident, and he was kind of making some moves, too, starting from the pit lane.
Yeah, he started on the hards, so, you know, he had a different strategy from the start of the race. But I think Daniel, I voted for Daniel Driver of the Day. That you have to vote a lot earlier, premature. So I voted, 16 laps to the end. And of course, Norris was flying. So I think it's a good tie. But when I think about in retrospect the entire weekend, I think Daniel's the win of the weekend.
100%.
Qualifying, just on it. I mean, George even said it post qualifying yesterday. Daniel has been the most consistent all weekend. I mean, I think when you rule out Max, of course, but
I think consistent. The fact that he's only, you say this is the second race back, but before that he was only back for a race and a half, or
he did 3 races.
3 races.
Yeah.
So I mean, he's still not even fully back into the car yet, and he's in a car that he's never he hasn't been in.
And so
10 years.
After this weekend, he's now the lead driver at AlphaTauri with the most points, and his performance. He held off Lewis for some time. Yep. He almost caught George at the end.
Yep. If he would have had a couple more laps, he probably could have caught.
In an AlphaTauri that's been bottom of the barrel, slowest car, poor performance, everything. Is he hungry for the Red Bull seat? And
I think he's hungry to be back in Formula One. He's good in top form because he was probably still able to train while he was recovering from his hand injury. Mm-hmm. And he was joking about it in the post-race interview that some of his turns, he had to have his pinky up because he doesn't have full mobility quite yet. So he's kind of being delicate, and they were kind of joking with him, which is kind of funny.
That's just his finesse.
His finesse. He just drives it so well.
It was a great weekend, though. I mean, I think for me, it was exciting. I think a lot of people are rooting for Daniel Ricciardo, to perform well. Tough weekend. I think he's in Austin. He said he was a little rusty. He had to kind of brush it off. But this weekend, leaps and bounds, world of difference. But
he left the rust in Austin.
Yeah, he left the rust in Austin with the other part of his Fu Manchu do. So he's just got the mustache now. Yeah. So.
I will say this about Austin's track. They did complain about how bumpy it is. And I have seen a lot of people talk about online and how it's not even an F1 worthy track at the moment because of how bumpy it is.
That's what Max said, yeah.
Yeah, and I'll say this for being on the roads just outside of the track.
Yes.
So I'm driving an RV into the parking lots where we have to stay, and some of them are some back country roads, just a 2-lane road, real on the side of some hills, rolling meadow area, but they are crumbling. Even those roads are crumbling.
I think it's a combination not only of that, but of the heat, and the roads are just bowing.
So I can only imagine, obviously they're going to take better condition care of a racetrack
of the circuit, yeah.
But it definitely is an issue there.
100%.
And last year when we were at turn 1, you could see the bumps and how some of the drivers would have to navigate around them coming into just turn 1 because they were there. And I could only have gotten worse. I mean, we saw
when we walked the track how bad, people were bottoming out at turn 1.
Oh, yeah.
So.
Yeah, it makes sense. So, that's all I got to say about it.
I was like, we're back to Austin again.
Sorry. We've been gone for a month. We got to talk about it.
I feel bad.
Yeah, sorry. If you guys are avid listeners and watchers, thank you. Sorry, it just things got.
It's hard when there's race after race after race too. So obviously we went to Austin. We drove there. It's a 20-hour drive from where we live. We drove back. We had to go straight back to work. And then you're going into the next race weekend, you know? So it's like, how do we really film the content? So, you know, great experience. Obviously, when you're at the circuit or when you're at home, it's a little bit easier, you know, to film. But, of course, we had to talk about it. But back to Mexico. So, you know, obviously, I think the loser of the weekend, so obviously the winner of the weekend for me is AlphaTauri.
Yep.
Loser of the weekend, it's Aston Martin again.
Yeah.
And it's almost, like, I feel like with Aston Martin, it's almost like, I don't know if Alonso did, like, a curse on the team when he said, this is our last race and we're not going to be on the podium. And then it's just been downhill. But I also think that, in my opinion, Aston was like, we have this great performance at the beginning of the season. The car's doing great. And they were so greedy that they were like, let's change it. Let's finesse it. Let's, you know, add to it, because they were so close to, like, Red Bull pace in some weekends. Yeah. That they made these drastic changes that, like, it did not work for them.
I haven't seen a lot work for them at all. I mean, I will tell you this, their new update seems to be okay, because they had Lando. No, I'm telling you, Lance Stroll was right behind.
Which race are you talking about? Mexico?
No, Mexico, they both DNF'd.
Yeah.
So I don't know what happened with it. I would tell you nothing worked at all.
So here's the thing. Hold on a second. We're tying it back to Austin. They were on their setup from, like, Qatar or whatever, where Fernando kept the old setup.
Original, right.
Lance kept the new setup.
Yeah.
Terrible race from both of them. We come to Austin. We're obviously on the sprint weekend. They go into Parc Fermé. They hate their car. They both start from the pit lane. Fernando has an okay race. Ends up, like, DNFing late in the race. Yeah. Lance has a great race. Ends up P7. In contention, potentially, for driver of the day. And then we come back to this weekend. Fernando's back on the old spec. He did not do well this weekend at all. Anyways, 2 spins, practice qualifying, tough. Ends up pretty much starting in the back, is running last at one point. They retire the car. Lance puts it into Bottas.
But there was, like, issues even in practice for those guys. Yeah, it was.
Overall, it's just not looking good for them. I think they're 100% focused on the next year. They're going to lose another position in the Drivers' Championship for sure. There's no way they're going to hold on to P4. No. McLaren is, like, literally right there. So
McLaren is too fast right now. They are number 2 squad, or at least that's what they were a couple weeks ago. But they are top tier team, and Aston Martin, like you just said, is not holding suit. They are falling back fast. Yeah.
It's not looking good.
You know what I also like about the Mexican GP being right around this time is I like when it's around Halloween. I like all the festivities there. I think that's a cool.
You like the vibes.
I like the vibes for the Mexican GP. Absolutely, during the Halloween time, I think it's a perfect time for that race to be there.
It's just too bad it doesn't fall. It should really fall, like, Halloween, Day of the Dead.
Day of the Dead should be
November 1st.
Yeah.
But I get it. I think it's lined up that way before. But, the calendar obviously fluctuates. But it is cool. You know, they do some big stuff. We always love the F1 mariachi intro.
Yes.
We didn't get it every session this weekend, but, it's always fun. We did get it,
and they had the band performing on the for the national anthem, or not the national anthem.
Oh, yes.
But they did it on
the build-up.
The build-up, yep.
Yeah. And then, obviously, they have the cool podium ceremony where they raise the car, which is always, like, an extra effect. This year, I think, is the first year Max has worn the sombrero, but which makes for some good photos.
Yes.
But, yeah, I mean, it's a cool overall good weekend. I feel like there's always, like, a huge gap in racing. Like, there's never really super close battles within the top. But the midfield this year has just really delivered, I think, the best racing.
I mean, there's still a toss-up for second, third, and fourth. I mean, yeah, I think.
Well, the Drivers' Championship as of right now.
Yeah, that whole area is up for grabs, too.
I mean, think about this. If we would have came into this race with Lewis not disqualified, and then we had this race, it would basically be flat and even. Lewis would be down 1 point going into Brazil with three races to go.
What if Sergio didn't DNF either? Where would he have been? And then how close would they have been? Maybe 5 points, maybe 7 points. You know, it would
Potentially.
have been a lot closer maybe. You never know.
It's still 20 points between the two drivers.
Yeah.
3 races left.
It's going down in the
Brazil
last one.
is a favorite of Lewis. I think Lewis is geeked up, riding a high right now.
They got him in a good car. The car is running nice.
I don't even think the car is that great. I think that they've been very open. It's been challenging.
Yeah.
I think, and I have said it the last 2 weekends, if we could just get Mercedes to qualify better, we would see some amazing Max and Lewis. And I'm like so ready for that. I mean, I know I was like psychotic in 2021, like because it just was so stressful, but they're like the two best. We want to see them battle each other.
We do want to see them battle each other. And honestly, we want to see like a 3-way or multiple teams and have it be like, oh man, how is the undercutting going and things like that. And we're not getting that right now because we are getting such domination. I mean, I think Max was 13 seconds at one point.
I think he ended the race 15 seconds ahead of Lewis.
Yeah, so I mean,
no, it was like 13-8 because Lewis saved it all for the end so he could get fastest lap.
Right. So I mean, look, that's a pretty big gap.
It is. I think you know it's interesting because we were watching the time on boards and I'm like, there was so many times where they'd be running so close to lap. Like time similar.
Oh yeah, a little bit faster.
And I'm like, how the hell is he 13 seconds ahead? But, you know, 2 different strategies. Max was on hards. Lewis was on mediums. They both had to go 37 laps to the end after the red flag. I didn't think that the mediums were going to hold up. Max burned his out 20 laps into the race.
Right.
So I was like, oh, God, Leclerc is going to catch Lewis. It's going to be, you know, kind of crazy. But then you look at Lando on a set of mediums. He pit right before the red flag, and he comes out, and he's like in P14 after the restart and finishes P5.
Yeah.
I mean, he was on rails.
Yeah, he was making some good passes too in spots that normally cars that can't pass, which was kind of a fun, which kind of I made that race very interesting. And then we were watching the Daniel Ricciardo at the very last lap, and they always do it.
Oh my God!
Always do it. They cut away to the race leader to come around for the finish line, and you know, like why are they even showing Max finish? You know,
they have to cut to Max at the end of the race because they don't show him the entire race.
Yeah,
because he's just leading and he's just by himself. The only time they'll cut to Max is if he's on the radio with his engineer. Doing some type of funny, you know, commentary. But it was within a tenth. It was like half a tenth. And we're watching Max cross the finish line. And I'm like, oh my God, cut to the Russell-Ricardo battle. Which, you know, Russell held him off. But I think a couple more laps. George cooked his tires.
Yeah.
Battling Carlos for sure.
He did.
So, yeah, it was a good race. It was a good race. Bummer for Checo. I think he was, you know, bummed to see. It was tough to see him in the garage.
They tried to get him back out there. I think they did everything they probably could to try to give him.
I mean, the side of his car
was missing.
Was like if you got T-boned in a car accident, the entire side was missing. I can't believe he got going as quick as he did.
Sure.
You know, so it's a bummer to see. He had, you know, an okay race in Austin. Like, I think, you know, like tough sprint race, you know, and then just, you know, he had a little bit, some overtakes. Qatar, obviously, you know, terrible sprint race, not a great finish. It's just been a tough few races for him. So, and I think on top of that, the big discussion, of course, like you commented on earlier, was just all the media rumors, you know.
About the retirement stuff. Yeah, I don't get that. I mean, technically, he did retire in Mexico.
Right.
So he announced his retirement by retiring in the car for the race.
Yeah.
But I don't see him retiring this year. He wants the race. He wants that seat. And until he's told he doesn't have that seat, he's going to have that seat, you know.
Well, he has a contract through the end of next year.
I mean,
we've seen Red Bull do some different things, you know. We've seen him end careers in the middle of a season or make changes. So who's to know? I think Checo's a good racer. I mean, he's won 2 races this year and he's done some great things. I think if he stays with Red Bull, he stays with Red Bull. If he doesn't, I think he'll go somewhere else. But there's only one seat open right now for next year.
Yeah.
So, but who knows? I mean, we'll see what happens. Tough weekend for him. Tough for the fans, I'm sure. You know,
I think most Chec-OUT fans were gutted, especially there's a lot of people that just. I mean, it was probably 99. I kept hearing them say 99% Chec-OUT fans there, and there probably was something like that.
There was a lot.
Yeah.
I mean, we heard Max had bodyguards coming into this weekend. That's what Helmut Marko confirmed. So hopefully he lended them out to Charles Leclerc post-race.
Yeah, I think he might need them.
He might need them, that's for sure. So.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think other than that, I mean, it was a good weekend. I mean, anything else that you have?
No, I think that kind of sums it up. I think we saw a little bit of rain on practices, which was kind of odd. Because it wasn't going to be forecast. It wasn't forecasted for the race. So, that was another thing to talk about. But other than that, good weekend, good racing. I enjoyed the midfield battle. Mm-hmm. It was definitely a better race than others. Back to back. I'm already ready for the next one. We're going to Brazil.
Brazil.
And I'm hoping that we finally get a Lewis Hamilton win some point soon.
Yes. It's hammer time.
Yeah.
2 questions.
Go ahead.
Mercedes or Ferrari at the end of the season? Who's going to win? 20 points, a little bit more than 20 points separate them.
Wow, it's going. That's a tough one.
It's going down to Abu Dhabi, I think.
I think so too. But I'm going to go with Mercedes.
Okay. Checo or Hamilton?
Hamilton. Unfortunately, sorry, Checo.
I think I agree.
Both?
I think that yes. I think the constructors scares me a little bit more because right now, I mean, all year Ferrari has had the quali pace. They just don't have the race pace and the tire management, and that's why I think they struggle in the race. Like, Charles is still waiting for Lewis's mediums to fall off right now. I mean, it's like I expected. I was like, man, this is tough. I know we'll probably get the jump. Which honestly, if Lewis didn't get past Charles on that amazing overtake, where I thought he was gonna go a little crazy on the grass. If he wouldn't have got past him, he probably would have been in a different situation, kind of similar to where George was at the end of the race. But, he did the right thing because he's Lewis Hamilton. But, they looked good, and Carlos knows how to defend. Like, he knows how to hold his position.
Yeah.
So I think it's going to be a tight battle to the end, and hopefully there's no mistakes, and Mercedes will hold it off. But I agree. I'm hoping for a Mercedes win before the end of the year.
Yeah, me too. Well, I guess that's it for us. Kind of a short one, wasn't a full hour. And honestly, we're just kind of getting back in the swing of the podcast thing because we did take a nice long little break. And you got any questions? Just kind of spin around. I'm kind of curious on what you guys thought too on the race. What you guys thought of the Lewis disqualification from Austin
and Charles.
I mean, is the FAA do too much, not enough? Do they,
Are they inconsistent?
That's
I don't know.
Good question. And I would like to see if you guys have made it this far, if you hear that question, answer it for us. Because I think there are some inconsistencies. Mm-hmm. I think they're trying to do better, but I think they could do better.
Yeah, they could. I also want to hear from everybody, Mercedes or Ferrari, Checo or Hamilton. How many races is Max going to win? We're at 16.
That's a good question, too.
We're at 16. He's now at 51 race wins. He's tied with Prost. We had a few, I know we keep saying we're ending it, but we had a few, I guess, records broken. We had Leclerc, who now tied Alonso for their pole positions. Max has now won 10 Charles Leclerc pole starts, which I don't know if that's a good stat. And Max awarded himself with beating his own record of 15 race wins in a season from last year to 16 this year. We have 3 races to go. Is he going for 19?
He is.
Please, dear God, no. I mean, all the power to Max. We value, and I think it's been enjoyable to watch him race. I think everybody gets excited when there's somebody else that wins a race, but if he wins 19, he deserves it.
Yeah, I mean, he's in the prime. I've said this over the weekend back in Austin while we were there. He's driving in the top form. He's in the prime of his life, in the best car, and he's committing the fewest mistakes. And the mistakes that he is committing, you don't even see them. Or if you do see it, it's because he did a 360 donut and pulled it out and kept going without a problem.
Like in Austin.
Exactly.
Or like last year, spin to win. I mean.
So look, I think he's a very skilled driver. He comes from lineage of both parents driving. He's been driving since he was, I think, 4.
I think his sister drove too.
Yeah, I think look, he's the champion. He's a 3-time champion.
Yeah.
And until somebody can prove that wrong.
Every driver that has won 3 consecutive championships goes on to win a 4th. So.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I guess we're gonna end it there. We're gonna be back in 1 week's time. We will be back.
We will be back
for Brazil. We promise. And things are changing. So this little background thing that you see here, hopefully not too much longer. I'm hoping by next season we will be in a different spot. And that's been kind of one thing is like I have to break this down because this is the regular life. You know what I mean? Yeah. And we can't always have all of our camera gear and audio stuff out all day long. So we'll be in a different place soon enough. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. Until next time, we'll see you guys later. Bye.
Bye.